You spend roughly a third of your life doing something completely unconscious, yet if you miss even a little bit of it, your entire body and mind just start to break down.
It really is quite staggering when you think about it.
Right. I mean, you lie there, completely paralyzed, hallucinating vividly, entirely vulnerable to the outside world, and yet biology insists that you must do this every single day.
Yeah, it sounds utterly terrifying when you frame it as a concept of sheer vulnerability. I mean, if you pitch that idea to a science fiction writer, they might reject it as well as too absurd for a species that is supposed to be focused on survival.
Exactly.
But it remains the most demanding, uncompromising biological imperative we possess.
It truly is the ultimate biological mystery. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are taking apart the mechanics, the myths, and the absolute necessity of sleep.
It's a brilliant topic.
It is. And to do this, we are looking at a really diverse, incredibly dense stack of research. We are pulling insights from the Japanese Ministry of Health's massive 2023 sleep guide, alongside some rather complex but fascinating neuroscience papers from the journals Science and Nature.
Some really cutting-edge stuff in it.
Absolutely. Plus research straight out of Tsukuba University and clinical data from sleep technology specialists.
Yeah, the technological aspect is advancing so rapidly right now.
It really is. So our mission for you today is to move past the generic advice of, just get more rest.
Because that advice is essentially useless on its own.
Spot on. We are going to uncover why you absolutely cannot catch up on sleep on the weekends, explore the rare genetic mutants who genuinely only need 3 hours a night, and decode the exact numbers you need based on your age. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. Well, we should probably begin by looking backward, far before humans ever existed.
Good idea.
Because to truly grasp how to optimize your own sleep, you have to understand why the mechanism exists at all. And the most shocking revelation in the evolutionary biology data is that sleep predates the evolution of the brain.
I found that detail absolutely staggering.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Completely. When we think of sleep, we think of it as a state of mind. But the sources point to organisms like jellyfish and hydras.
Yeah, creatures that do not have a central nervous system at all.
Right, they possess no brain whatsoever, just a sort of loose network of nerves. Yet they exhibit clear sleep behaviors. How do they even measure that?
Well, the researchers measure this by observing their pulsing movements. A jellyfish called the Cassiopeia, for instance, it pulses its bell continuously to move water over its body. But at night, that pulsing drops by about a third.
Just a natural slowdown.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Furthermore, if researchers drop food nearby or create a disturbance in the water, a sleeping jellyfish takes significantly longer to react than an awake one.
So they are genuinely unresponsive.
They are. And if you keep them awake by constantly prodding them, they actually show signs of intense fatigue the next day.
Oh, wow. Which completely shatters the assumption that sleep is merely a way to rest a tired brain.
Precisely.
If a brainless organism is biologically forced to enter a dormant state, sleep must be a foundational law of cellular biology. It's a mechanism for repairing cells at a microscopic level written into the very fabric of life on Earth long before complex thought ever evolved.
Yeah, and the complexity of that rest scales up beautifully as evolution progresses. The research highlights octopuses as a prime example here.
I loved this part.
It's fascinating. Now, an octopus is an invertebrate. Our evolutionary paths diverged roughly 450 million years ago. We are vastly different creatures.
Essentially aliens to each other.
Quite literally, yes. Yet marine biologists have observed that octopuses experience two distinct stages of sleep that eerily mirror our own.
They have a quiet phase, which looks like our deep, slow wave sleep, right?
Yeah, and an active phase, which mimics our REM sleep.
And just to clarify for everyone, REM stands for rapid eye movement. That's the phase where humans experience our most vivid dreams.
Spot on. And the visual evidence of this in octopuses is absolutely stunning. During their active sleep phase, the color-changing cells on their skin, which are known as chromatophores, begin to flash wildly.
Like a light show.
Exactly like that. They cycle through vibrant patterns and textures completely unconsciously. Because octopuses use these color changes in the waking world to camouflage themselves from predators or react to threats, the flashing during sleep strongly suggests their nervous system is reacting to internal visual stimuli.
So they are dreaming about their day.
Or at least their equivalent of it, yeah.
That is incredible. And if two species separated by 450 million years of evolution both possess this intricate two-stage architecture of sleep, it means the system is ancient, highly preserved, and absolutely critical to survival.
It has to be. The sheer biological cost of sleep proves its necessity. We have to view this through the lens of prehistoric survival.
Right, the danger element.
Exactly. If an animal falls unconscious for 8 hours a day, it becomes prime prey. It cannot forage for food, it cannot mate, and it cannot defend its territory.
You're a sitting duck.
The evolutionary disadvantage of being paralyzed and unaware is astronomical.
Yeah.
Therefore, whatever is happening internally during those 8 hours must be so overwhelmingly vital that it outweighs the constant looming threat of being eaten alive.
Nature would have just ruthlessly bred sleep out of existence millions of years ago if it weren't essential.
Without a doubt.
I tried to visualize this vital internal work by thinking of a busy corporate office building. During the day, the office is all about output phones ringing, meetings, emails being sent. That is your brain when you are awake.
A very noisy environment.
Yeah. But when the doors lock at 6 p.m., the building doesn't actually shut down. The night shift arrives. You have the janitorial staff coming in to scrub the floors and take out the rubbish, and you have the IT department running secure backups of the day's data.
That analogy perfectly mirrors the two primary functions of human sleep highlighted in these neuroscience papers. If we look at the janitorial staff first, the brain is incredibly active during deep, non-REM sleep in washing away cellular waste.
Right.
Specifically, it targets a metabolic byproduct called amyloid beta.
Now, I saw the term amyloid beta repeatedly in the Tsukuba University research. But what actually is it? I mean, is it a toxin we ingest from the environment or something the body produces naturally?
It is entirely natural. Every time a brain cell fires, every time you form a thought or make a movement, your neurons consume energy. Amyloid beta is essentially the exhaust fumes from that cellular engine.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so the sticky protein fragment that builds up in the brain tissue throughout your waking hours. Now, during deep sleep, the brain utilizes something called the glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system, what does that mean in simple terms?
You can think of it as the brain's internal plumbing network. The brain cells literally physically shrink in size.
Wait, they actually change size?
They do, yeah. They shrink by about 60%, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and literally power wash the amyloid beta out of the brain.
So the janitors are quite literally hosing down the corridors.
Spot on.
And if you cut your sleep short, you are sending the janitors home early.
Which leaves the rubbish to pile up. And this is where it gets serious. If amyloid beta is not efficiently cleared out night after night, these sticky proteins begin to clump together into insoluble plaques.
And that leads to disease.
Yes. The accumulation of these plaques is heavily and inextricably linked to the neurodegeneration seen in Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Chronic sleep deprivation is quite literally allowing toxic waste to suffocate your neurons.
It is a terrifying mechanical reality.
It really is.
And then we have the IT backup team from my analogy. The research from the International Institute for Integrative Sleep Medicine at Tsukuba University isolated the exact mechanism for how we save memories.
This was a brilliant paper.
Yeah. They discovered a highly specific circuit consisting of merely 3 individual neurons that acts as the switchboard for memory consolidation. 3 neurons.
Finding a 3-neuron circuit in a brain containing over 86 billion neurons is an astonishing feat of mapping.
A needle in a haystack.
Exactly. When you learn something new during the day, say a new route to work or a few phrases in a foreign language, that information is held in a very fragile temporary state. It is just a fleeting electrical signal.
Okay.
During sleep, those specific neurons coordinate a process called synaptic plasticity.
Synaptic plasticity, meaning the brain is molding itself.
Precisely. They convert that fragile electrical signal into a permanent structural change in the brain's wiring.
So if you don't sleep, the IT team never hits save, and the document is just lost when the computer reboots the next morning.
The data simply isn't transferred to long-term storage. Your ability to learn, adapt, and recall information degrades severely without that dedicated offline processing time.
Which brings us to a massive paradox, doesn't it?
Oh, massively.
If sleep is this crucial, deeply ingrained survival mechanism that cleans our brains and saves our identities, why on earth are modern humans so utterly terrible at it? We seem to be the only species that actively fights the urge to sleep.
Well, we have engineered a society that is fundamentally hostile to our biology. Look at the data from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They track the average sleep times of citizens across 33 different nations.
And Japan was right at the bottom, correct?
The absolute bottom of the list. They have the shortest average sleep duration of any developed country, which is what prompted the Japanese Ministry of Health to completely overhaul their public health guidelines in 2023.
And the data within that 2023 sleep guide sounds a blaring alarm. It unequivocally states that sleeping less than 6 hours a night shifts from being a minor fatigue issue to a severe systemic health hazard.
The epidemiological studies are completely unambiguous on this. Consistently dropping below that 6-hour threshold triggers a cascade of hormonal and metabolic failures.
It's not just feeling groggy.
Not at all. It dramatically increases the risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. To put it bluntly, your risk of overall mortality of simply dying younger spikes significantly.
Now, I can already hear the collective rationalization of the listeners because it is the exact excuse I have used for years myself.
Let me guess. The weekend catch-up.
Exactly. The thought process is, right, I only sleep 5 hours a night from Monday to Friday because of work, but I sleep in until midday on Saturday and Sunday. I catch up on my sleep debt. But the sources ruthlessly dismantle this catch-up myth.
Yeah, the concept of weekend catch-up sleep is a comforting biological illusion.
An illusion that hurts to hear.
I know, but the research indicates that sleeping 10 hours on a Sunday does absolutely nothing to reverse the metabolic damage inflicted during a 5-hour workweek.
Oh.
In fact, binge sleeping on the weekends creates a secondary problem that chronobiologists call social jet lag.
Social jet lag. So
Yeah.
you are subjecting your body to the equivalent of an international flight every single weekend.
The biological confusion is identical. Your internal organs do not know what a weekend is. They operate on a strict 24-hour cycle.
Right.
When you wake up at 6 a.m. all week and then suddenly shift your wake time to 11 a.m. on Sunday, you are violently dragging your internal clock across 5 time zones. Your liver, your heart, and your digestive system fall completely out of sync with your brain.
And that constant shifting prevents your biology from ever establishing a stable, restorative rhythm.
Exactly.
I am struggling to reconcile this with another piece of research in our stack, though. A paper published in the journal Science detailed how the brain has a specific thalamic circuit, the thalamus being a relay station deep in the center of the brain.
Yes, the homeostasis paper.
Right. This circuit acts as a sensor for sleep deprivation. When you are severely tired, it triggers what they call homeostatic recovery sleep.
Homeostasis being the body's fundamental drive to maintain a stable internal balance.
So it functions like an emergency brake, forcing you into a much deeper, heavier sleep to recover, like the thermostat in your house.
That is a perfect example. If the room gets too cold, the heating kicks in to return the temperature to a baseline.
Right. So if my brain has an emergency brake designed to force deep restorative sleep when I am deprived, why doesn't that 10-hour Sunday sleep-in actually fix my 5-hour work week? The mechanism seems built for exactly that purpose.
It's a great question. The distinction lies in the difference between acute tiredness and chronic systemic damage.
Acute versus chronic.
Okay, the thalamic circuit is an evolutionary response to an acute one-off deficit. Imagine a prehistoric human who had to stay awake all night to guard the camp from a predator.
A one-time emergency.
Yes. The next night, that homeostatic drive will plunge them into an incredibly dense, heavy sleep to clear out the immediate buildup of cellular exhaust. It recovers the acute energy deficit.
But the 5-hour work week isn't an acute emergency. It's a slow, chronic bleed.
Spot on. The emergency brake simply cannot handle chronic misuse. While your brain can certainly recover the subjective feeling of being tired after a massive weekend sleep, it cannot magically reach back in time and undo the hormonal chaos that occurred on Wednesday.
It can't unring the bell.
Exactly. It cannot retroactively fix the elevated cortisol levels, the sustained high blood pressure, or the insulin resistance that was steadily damaging your blood vessels all week. You wake up on Sunday afternoon feeling less sleepy, but the hidden metabolic scarring remains untouched.
That makes the whole hustle culture mentality seem incredibly foolish.
It's biologically disastrous.
And the damage isn't isolated to the physical body. It fundamentally alters human personality. The National Center of Neurology and Psychiatry conducted a study on the accumulation of this chronic sleep debt. They found that persistent sleep deprivation actively severs the functional communication between two critical structures in the brain, the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex.
We should definitely define the roles of those two regions because their dynamic dictates almost all human behavior.
Please do.
The amygdala is your brain's primal emotional threat detector. It is the primitive alarm bell that triggers fear, stress, aggression, and anxiety.
This is a panic button.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, the anterior cingulate cortex is part of the more highly evolved logical frontal lobe, It acts as the emotional regulator. It assesses situations rationally and effectively tells the amygdala to stand down when a threat isn't real.
So the anterior cingulate cortex is the adult in the room, and the amygdala is a toddler prone to tantrums.
I love that analogy, yes.
And when you accumulate sleep debt, the physical wiring connecting the adult to the toddler degrades. The logical brain loses its grip on the emotional brain.
The brakes on your emotional reactions fail completely. When that functional connectivity diminishes, you are left with a hypersensitive amygdala that reacts to minor inconveniences like a slow internet connection, or a blunt email, as if they were literal threats to your survival.
It explains so much about modern office culture.
It explains why sleep deprivation is so tightly correlated with heightened anxiety, explosive irritability, and a profound vulnerability to clinical depression. You simply cannot regulate your mood because the biological hardware required to do so is temporarily disconnected.
It is genuinely terrifying to realize how much of our perceived personality, or our patience, is just biology crying out for maintenance.
Quite literally.
So, having established that weekend binge sleeping is a myth and chronic deprivation breaks our cognitive and physical hardware, what are the actual target numbers we should be hitting?
Well, the 2023 Sleep Guide from the Ministry of Health provides incredibly clear parameters segmented by life stage. It moves away from the old, generic 8 hours for everyone advice and gets highly specific.
Which is much more useful.
Exactly. For the working-age adult population, the physiological sweet spot is firmly between 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night.
And as we covered, dipping below that 6-hour mark is where the metabolic and emotional wheels start to fall off.
Yeah, some individuals naturally require up to 9 hours, which is entirely healthy, but the 6-hour floor is a hard biological limit for the vast majority of human adults. However, when we look at the guidelines for children, the numbers scale up dramatically.
I was shocked by this section.
Primary school children, roughly ages 6 to 12, require between 9 and 12 hours of sleep every single night.
9 to 12 hours. I mean, if you are a parent listening to this, you are probably laughing at the sheer logistical impossibility of getting a 10-year-old to sleep 11 hours when factoring in homework, football practice, dinner, and screen time.
It's incredibly difficult in today's society.
Even high schoolers, according to the guide, require 8 to 10 hours. It feels completely incompatible with modern schooling.
The societal structure is undoubtedly fighting against the biology, but the physical requirement remains absolute. A lack of sleep at this developmental stage doesn't just result in a grumpy child.
There are physical consequences.
Massive ones. Growth hormone is secreted almost exclusively during the deepest phases of slow-wave sleep. If a child's sleep is chronically cut short, their physical growth, bone density, and muscle development can be literally stunted.
And returning to the Tsukuba University findings on memory consolidation, if a student's brain doesn't get enough time to run that structural IT backup, their ability to retain the maths or vocabulary they learned that day is crippled.
Yes, they're sitting in a classroom the next day with a brain that hasn't saved yesterday's files.
They are essentially operating with a full hard drive. It makes academic struggle an inevitable biological outcome.
It does.
But the guide reveals a fascinating inversion when we look at the other end of the age spectrum. For the elderly, specifically those over 60, the Ministry of Health issues a warning that seems entirely counterintuitive. They state that the elderly should actively avoid spending more than 8 hours in bed.
Which throws a lot of people off.
Yeah, I would assume that an older person who perhaps feels frail or tired would benefit from resting as much as possible. Why limit their time in bed?
The crucial distinction here is between time spent in bed and actual time asleep. As the human body ages, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the tiny region in the brain that acts as our master circadian clock, begins to degrade.
Okay.
Consequently, sleep architecture becomes shallower. The elderly experience far less of that deep, slow wave sleep, and their rest becomes highly fragmented. They naturally wake up multiple times throughout the night.
So an elderly person might think, I keep waking up at 4 a.m. and I feel tired during the day, so I should start going to bed at 8 p.m. to try and force more sleep.
And that is a dangerous trap.
Yeah.
An aging brain might only be physically capable of generating 6 hours of actual consolidated sleep. If that person stays in bed for 10 hours, they spend 4 of those hours tossing, turning, and experiencing frustrating micro-awakenings.
Which sounds miserable.
It is. This drastically lowers a metric sleep specialists call sleep restfulness.
Sleep restfulness being the subjective, psychological feeling of waking up actually feeling restored rather than just having been unconscious.
Exactly. Poor sleep restfulness causes immense psychological stress. Lying awake in the dark for hours triggers the release of cortisol, the stress hormone.
Ah, so they were stressing themselves out by trying to sleep.
The data shows that spending excessive time in bed awake actually increases cardiovascular risks and mortality in the elderly. Furthermore, the guide strongly advises against long daytime naps for older adults, as a 2-hour afternoon nap completely eradicates the biological sleep pressure needed to fall asleep at night, leading to even more severe fragmentation.
What's fascinating here is how the biological strategy shifts entirely. In youth, you require massive, uninterrupted blocks of time for structural brain and body development. In old age, the goal shifts to strict boundary-setting, restricting time in bed to forcefully condense the sleep you can get, preventing it from fragmenting into a stressful experience.
It is entirely about maintaining sleep efficiency rather than sheer duration.
This brings us to a fascinating subculture of sleep. We have firmly established that normal adults need 6 to 8 hours, and dipping below 6 hours is metabolic self-sabotage.
Unquestionably.
But anyone listening knows of a highly successful CEO, a politician, or a manic entrepreneur who aggressively claims they only sleep 4 hours a night, they never take a day off, and they operate at peak cognitive capacity. Are they just lying to build a mythos around their work ethic?
Well, a vast majority of them are likely exaggerating, or they are masking severe chronic sleep deprivation with massive constant doses of caffeine and adrenaline.
Right.
However, the scientific literature confirms that a tiny fraction of these individuals are telling the truth. There are biological exceptions to the rule.
We are talking about natural short sleepers,
Yeah.
literal genetic mutants.
Precisely. Researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, conducted a landmark long-term study on this phenomenon. They were approached by a mother and daughter who casually reported that they simply could not sleep more than about 6 hours a night, yet they suffered zero cognitive or physical ill effects.
They felt fine.
They were vibrant, healthy, and highly functional. So the researchers sequenced their genomes and discovered specific, highly rare genetic mutations.
The sources list several of these gene mutations: SIK3 and 783Y, DC2, ADRB1, NPSR1, and GRM1. What exactly are these mutant genes doing to bypass a 450 million-year-old biological requirement?
These genes heavily influence the regulation of the body's circadian rhythm and the efficiency of the brain's internal maintenance. To put it in the context of our earlier analogy, individuals with a DEC2 or SIK3 mutation possess a hyper-efficient night shift crew. Their glymphatic system washes away the amyloid beta at an accelerated rate, and their neurons consolidate memories incredibly fast. They can complete all the necessary biological repair work in just 4 to 6 hours, whereas a normal human requires 6 to 8 hours to execute the exact same processes.
They essentially have a biological cheat code.
They do. They maintain perfect metabolic and cognitive health on a fraction of the sleep.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this exposes the immense danger of modern grind culture. Society heavily glorifies the idea of sacrificing sleep for productivity. You have ordinary people trying to use sheer willpower, alarm clocks, and coffee to mimic what is, in reality, a microscopically rare DNA anomaly.
It is arguably one of the most destructive trends in modern wellness and business culture. Willpower cannot overwrite your genetic code.
You can't just try harder to be a mutant.
Exactly. Unless you have undergone genome sequencing and medically verified that you possess the DEC2 mutation, attempting to force your body to run on 4 hours of sleep is biologically disastrous.
You are simply forcing your amygdala to disconnect, halting your memory consolidation, and inviting the insulin resistance we discussed. You are running the brain without the mutations, expecting mutant results.
You are accumulating a catastrophic sleep debt. You simply cannot out-hustle your own biology.
So, assuming the listener does not possess mutant DNA, which statistically they do not, how can they structurally optimize the 6 to 8 hours they are biologically mandated to get? Because lying in a bed for 8 hours is useless if the environment is actively preventing your brain from shutting down.
This requires hacking the architecture of your sleep environment. And the single most powerful environmental cue we have to manage is light.
But not just the presence of light, the specific wavelength of it, right?
Yes. The sources dive deeply into the mechanism behind this, focusing on a specific protein in the eye called melanopsin. Now, I think most people understand that the eye has rods and cones for seeing shapes and colors, but melanopsin serves a completely different master.
How so?
Your visual system is entirely separate from your circadian system. Scattered among your retina are specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells.
That's quite a mouthful. What do they do?
They don't help you read a book or recognize a face. Their sole job is to measure the ambient brightness of the sky, to tell your brain's master clock what time of day it is. Melanopsin is the photopigment inside these cells, and it is highly, almost exclusively, sensitive to blue light.
Blue light specifically.
Yes, specifically light in the 460 to 480 nanometer wavelength range.
Which, by no coincidence at all, is the exact wavelength of a clear blue sky at midday. And unfortunately, it is also the exact wavelength blasted directly into our retinas by the LED screens of our smartphones and tablets.
Exactly. When melanopsin absorbs that specific blue light, it fires a signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which then signals the pineal gland to immediately halt the production of melatonin.
Melatonin being the hormone that signals to your body that it is time to transition into sleep. So you're literally turning off the sleep signal.
You are.
The sources make a crucial distinction here regarding our devices. People often justify their habits by saying, well, I stare at a massive computer monitor or a television all evening, so looking at my phone in bed isn't doing any extra damage. But the physics of light proves that smartphones are significantly more destructive to sleep onset.
It comes down to the inverse square law of light. The intensity of light radiating from a source is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source.
Meaning distance matters massively.
Enormously. In practical terms, a television is bright, but it is situated 3 meters away across the living room. Most people hold their smartphones a mere 6 to 8 inches from their face while lying in the dark.
The proximity exponentially increases the energy hitting the retina.
You are effectively flooding your melanopsin sensors with midday daylight intensity signals. You are chemically tricking your brain into believing the sun is rising just as you pull the duvet over your chest. It creates a massive biological confusion.
So, distance yourself from the blue light. Put the phone across the room. Now, what about temperature? The Japanese sleep guide heavily advocates for taking a warm bath 1 to 2 hours before getting into bed. On the surface, the biology seems backwards. We know the body needs to cool down to initiate sleep, so why immerse yourself in hot water?
It is a brilliant physiological hack involving how the body regulates its internal thermostat. The human body has a core temperature, the temperature of your brain and internal organs, and a shell temperature, which is the surface of your skin.
Okay, core and shell.
To initiate deep sleep, your core temperature needs to drop by about 1 degree Celsius.
So how does heating the skin in a bath cool the core?
When you take a warm bath, your skin temperature rises. But when you step out of the bath into a cooler room, your body recognizes the excess heat and reacts aggressively to dissipate it. It dilates the blood vessels in your extremities, your hands and feet, turning them into highly efficient radiators.
The blood rushes to the surface of your skin to vent the heat into the surrounding air.
Exactly. And as the heat leaves through your hands and feet, the temperature of the blood returning to your core plummets.
Ah, that is so clever.
That steep, rapid drop in core body temperature is one of the strongest physiological triggers for sleep onset available to us. It mimics the natural temperature drop of the evening air that our ancestors evolved to fall asleep to.
The guide also has specific rules for bedroom temperature during the winter, noting that the room should be kept above 18 degrees Celsius. This goes beyond mere comfort, doesn't it? It is a vital warning regarding blood pressure, particularly for the elderly.
It is a very serious medical concern. When an older individual gets out of a warm bed to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, stepping into a freezing hallway causes an immediate, severe constriction of the blood vessels as the body desperately tries to conserve heat.
A sudden shock to the system?
Yes. This sudden vasoconstriction causes a massive spike in blood pressure,
Which dramatically elevates the risk of a nocturnal stroke or a heart attack.
The sleep environment must be a sanctuary of physiological stability, and that stability extends to our auditory environment. The World Health Organization guidelines cited in the research mandate that outdoor nighttime noise levels penetrating the bedroom should be kept strictly under 40 decibels.
40 decibels is incredibly quiet. It is roughly the equivalent of a hushed library or the low, distant hum of a modern refrigerator. Why is the threshold so low?
Because your ears do not have eyelids.
That's a great way to put it.
Even while you are in deep, slow wave sleep, your auditory cortex is actively monitoring the environment for threats. If a motorcycle revs its engine outside, or a door slams, generating noise above 40 decibels, it triggers an unconscious stress response via the sympathetic nervous system.
You don't consciously wake up, but your biology panics.
Exactly. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure elevates, and a microdose of cortisol is released into your bloodstream. Your brain instantly pulls you out of deep, restorative sleep into a lighter stage of sleep to prepare for a potential fight or flight scenario.
So you wake up the next morning feeling exhausted, completely unaware that your sleep architecture was fragmented dozens of times throughout the night.
because you have no conscious memory of hearing the noise.
We have dissected light, temperature, and noise, but our internal habits play just as large a role. The sources highlight something I found highly surprising regarding meal timing. Eating a solid breakfast is touted as a primary tool for resetting the biological clock. How does digesting food impact sleep?
We have to expand our view of the circadian rhythm. The master clock in the brain is set by light, as we discussed with melanopsin. But nearly every organ in your body, your liver, your pancreas, your gut, has its own peripheral biological clock.
Peripheral class.
Yes, and these peripheral clocks are set primarily by food intake.
So the brain watches the sun and the stomach watches the plate.
Exactly. When you eat a substantial breakfast shortly after waking, you send a powerful synchronizing signal to your entire metabolic system that the active phase of the day has officially begun. The liver and gut align with the brain.
And the opposite happens at night.
Yes. Late-night dinners and heavy snacking send a signal to those organs that the day is still ongoing.
You are forcing your digestive system to work the day shift during the middle of the night.
You push the peripheral biological clocks backward, delaying the drop in core body temperature and severely delaying the onset of restorative sleep. The organs simply cannot power down if they are tasked with metabolizing a heavy meal.
It is a delicate symphony of timing. And remarkably, modern technology is evolving to help us realign with these ancient rhythms. The sources discuss the rise of sleep technology, pointing out how gamification is bringing sleep awareness to the general public. They specifically highlight the app Pokemon Sleep, which was actually developed under the supervision of Dr. Masashi Yanagisawa from Tsukuba University.
It sounds trivial, doesn't it? Playing a mobile game to encourage sleep.
It does sound a bit silly at first.
But gamification is a profoundly effective behavioral modification tool. By rewarding users with digital creatures for maintaining consistent sleep and wake times, they are tricking millions of people into adhering to rigorous sleep hygiene routines that they would otherwise ignore.
But for those who require clinical-level analysis of their sleep, the technology has advanced far beyond the rudimentary motion sensors in a standard smartwatch. The sources highlight advanced devices like the insomnograph.
This is a crucial leap in diagnostic technology. A standard smartwatch relies on actigraphy. It essentially guesses whether you are asleep based on how much your wrist is moving and your heart rate.
It is a blunt instrument.
Very blunt. It cannot accurately differentiate between light sleep, deep sleep, and REM.
It knows you are lying still, but it doesn't know what your brain is doing.
Exactly. The insomnograph, conversely, was developed to measure your actual brain waves, your electroencephalogram, or EEG.
In your own home.
Yes. It allows individuals to capture a highly accurate clinical picture of their sleep architecture in their own bed, mapping the exact duration of memory consolidation and slow-wave cleansing without the anxiety of sleeping in a laboratory covered in medical wires.
So the goal of all this environmental hacking, the light reduction, the temperature control, the meal timing, is simply to artificially recreate the natural pre-industrial environment that our 450 million-year-old biology expects. We have to simulate a world without LEDs, central heating, and midnight food delivery.
We must engineer our environment to support our biology rather than assault it. However, we must also address the reality that sometimes perfect sleep hygiene is not a cure-all.
This is a vital point for anyone feeling hopeless. What happens if you do everything correctly? You banish the smartphone, you take the warm bath, you lower the thermostat, you eat breakfast, you track your brain waves, and yet you still wake up feeling physically ruined.
When a profound lack of sleep restfulness persists, despite immaculate lifestyle habits, we have to look beyond behavioral modification and consider underlying medical pathology. Sleep disorders are incredibly pervasive and systemically underdiagnosed in the general population.
The sources outline a few major ones, starting with sleep apnea. Now, the common societal stereotype of sleep apnea is a middle-aged, overweight man who snores violently.
That's the classic picture, yeah.
While obesity is a major risk factor, the research highlights a demographic that falls through the diagnostic cracks constantly: women post-menopause.
This is a massive failure in public health awareness. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the endocrinology. During a woman's reproductive years, the hormones estrogen and progesterone play a protective role in maintaining the muscle tone and rigidity of the upper airway.
They keep the throat from collapsing inward when you breathe.
Precisely. However, after menopause, the production of these hormones plummets drastically. The sudden loss of that hormonal support means the muscles in the throat become significantly more relaxed or lax during sleep.
Gravity takes over, the airway swells or collapses entirely, and the brain has to briefly wake the body up just to take a breath.
A woman who maintained perfect health and never snored a day in her life might suddenly develop severe obstructive sleep apnea in her 50s purely due to this hormonal shift.
And because she doesn't fit the classic profile of an overweight, snoring male, her chronic exhaustion is often misdiagnosed as depression, insomnia, or simply the natural fatigue of aging.
Her brain is being starved of oxygen dozens of times an hour, and it goes completely untreated.
That is a staggering medical blind spot. So what does this all mean? It means you shouldn't just blame yourself if you're tired. Another condition highlighted in the sources is restless leg syndrome, or RLS. The name makes it sound like a minor nuisance, a bit of fidgeting.
It is far from a minor nuisance.
The clinical description paints it as an intensely uncomfortable, sometimes painful neurological urge to move the legs the moment you try to fall asleep.
It is a torturous condition that completely obliterates the ability to initiate sleep. The patient is trapped in a state of exhaustion, but their nervous system forces them to move. What is fascinating is the physiological root of the disorder. RLS is heavily linked to iron deficiency in the brain.
Why does a lack of iron in the blood make your legs want to move?
Iron is a mandatory cofactor for the brain's synthesis of dopamine. Dopamine is the primary neurotransmitter responsible for regulating smooth, controlled muscle movement.
So a lack of iron means a lack of dopamine.
When iron levels drop, dopamine signaling in the basal ganglia becomes erratic, leading to these uncontrollable urges to move. This is why RLS is vastly more common in women, particularly during pregnancy, when the developing fetus rapidly depletes the mother's iron stores.
The sources also point out a litany of other female-specific sleep disruptions. The physical discomfort of menstrual pain severely fractures sleep architecture. And during pregnancy, beyond the risk of RLS, factors like severe leg cramps, shifting body mass, and the constant need for nocturnal urination comprehensively degrade the quality of rest.
The overarching takeaway from the clinical data is empowerment. If you are struggling with chronic, debilitating exhaustion, and you have already optimized your light, temperature, and habits, you must advocate for yourself within the medical system.
Do not resign yourself to the belief that you are just naturally a bad sleeper.
Exactly. Request a blood panel to check your ferritin and iron levels. Consult an endocrinologist regarding hormonal shifts. Demand a sleep study to rule out airway collapse. Exhaustion is often a symptom of an incredibly solvable mechanical failure.
We have covered an immense landscape of biology today. Let's trace the through line. We began by observing jellyfish and octopuses, proving that sleep is an ancient, non-negotiable mechanism for cellular repair and memory consolidation.
It's foundational to life.
We established the biological reality that human adults require 6 to 8 hours, that children require vastly more for physical growth, and that the elderly must condense their time in bed to maintain sleep efficiency. We dismantled the myth of the weekend catch-up, exposing the dangers of social jet lag and chronic sleep debt.
We explored the genetic mutants who can survive on 4 hours.
Yes, and outlined the strict environmental laws of light, heat, and timing required for the rest of us to mimic their efficiency.
And crucially, we highlighted the necessity of medical intervention when biology fails us, whether through hormonal changes or iron depletion.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a broader, somewhat philosophical question to ponder. We discussed how the architecture of sleep evolved 450 million years ago. It survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, and the complete reshaping of the planet. It is one of the most foundational, unyielding laws of life on Earth.
It is an evolutionary masterpiece of cellular maintenance.
Yet, out of the millions of species on this planet, modern human society is the absolute only one that actively attempts to suppress it. We willingly ignore a 450-million-year-old biological mandate for the sake of answering a late-night email, watching another episode of a television show, or trying to prove our dedication to a corporation.
It really puts our priorities into perspective, doesn't it?
It does. So the ultimate question is this. Will society eventually be forced to completely restructure its 24/7 always-on economy to finally respect our biological clocks? Or are we destined to just keep pushing our brains, firing the night shift, and letting the amyloid beta pile up until we collectively break?
It is a profound conflict between modern ambition and ancient biology, and the medical data suggests biology will always win in the end.
Remember the premise we started with. You spend a third of your life paralyzed in the dark. It is not wasted time. It is the most critical biological work you will ever do. It's time we start respecting the night shift. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Turn off the screens, lower the thermostat, and get a good night's rest tonight.